Welcome to Real Estate Unleashed. I'm your host, Regan Hildebrand with the Home Team Realty Group.
I am Bridget Quinn, and you can find me on all social media at B Quinn Realtor.
I forgot to mention you can find me on all social media at Regan. How's it going, Bridget?
It's going. We're chugging along. Another episode. Another Star Wars T-shirt.
Another Star Wars T-shirt.
Another
Still
Star
haven't
Wars.
made a dent.
Yep. We with episode 7 decided to break out the BB-8 unit.
The BB-8 unit is your co-pilot.
He is my co-pilot.
We all need a co-pilot or co-host. Oh my gosh! So we're entering the fall season of
it's fall,
real estate.
y'all.
Fall,
I believe
y'all.
I said that last time too.
How many more times can we wear T-shirts though? We're gonna start wearing
I know.
wearing the hoodies, I guess. Yeah. Getting there. Falling into real estate.
And haven't we fell a lot lately?
Falling out of love sometimes with real estate.
Yes.
As the case may be. Yeah. So, since last we talked, what's new?
Not a lot. Still chugging along with my listing. It's under contract now, so we're making headway and going through the motions, and had the inspections and had an appraisal already. So
fast, nice. Yeah.
Super fast. That's the way I like it.
Yeah. I noticed it's everything now with not quite as much going on in the market. It feels like appraisers, inspectors, they get out a little bit faster.
Well, I think now that I feel like they've had a chance to kind of catch that breath and catch back up on things and get back to a normal schedule rather than 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on whatever it is you're looking for out. Now they can come out within a few days or a week or so.
Yep. They're and it also feels like too that people are seeking out business versus just kind of like almost not wanting to take on more.
Right.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen with a surveyor was available a lot sooner than they used to be. It used to be
that was always a problem. I felt was unfortunately the surveyors they could be
on
average
like the
3
day
to 4
before
weeks
closing. Yeah. I literally had one deliver a survey. This was probably 6 months ago, the day of closing, to the attorney to be reported.
Wait until the finish line.
Yeah, as long as it gets there.
Yeah.
So now it's like everyone has decided to be a little bit more proactive.
Rather than reactive, well, now you have a little bit more of a chance to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the big message now that things, talking about how they're going back to the old normal. But the shifting back is that suddenly most people are getting back into that right mindset of having to go after things, be a little bit more aggressive to get the business. Although, that being said, we were talking before we hit the record button about a couple listings and issues that we've noticed in the market where maybe people haven't waken up to the realities.
Well, and again, it's kind of hard to figure out things. We don't have the crystal ball. We don't know exactly. The market could be one way one day and could be not drastically different the next. But in theory, those changes from day to day. And what I've seen and observed, I don't necessarily know that all agents have maintained that or continue to make those adjustments. I feel like some people are still in the mindset of 6 months ago. They haven't adjusted to what that market is showing.
Yep.
Would you say the same?
Yeah, absolutely. If you and point to be made with one of the listings that I have coming up is that you can look back at comps, and just to clarify for those that might not kind of understand where we come at for this, when we're pricing a home or coming up with recommendations for pricing for clients, the big piece is that we take a window of sales.
The snapshot of what's happened.
Yeah, a snapshot, that's a good way to put it, of what's happened within a certain radius or the neighborhood that they're in, depending on how many homes might be around there. And we typically go back 6 months.
6 months. I mean, I try, if I have a listing that, can support, there's been a lot of maybe closings within the last 3 months, then I would rather use the 3 months than the 6 months, because again, that shows a more accurate picture of what's happening at that moment.
Right. And that's always been the our practices, and appraisers that come out and do it as an actual appraisal similarly will take that 6 month window or as close as possible. But now that we've seen a slowdown of things, a lot of times in a neighborhood or a radius around the home, you will probably see more on that back end of the 6 months. And that was the case with one that I'm working on now, is that the last closing was June for this area, and there were 4 or 5 comps, but they're all again June or before.
And June or before at this stage in the game, it's a different market. I mean,
And my fear is that a lot of our brethren and sisters out there and everyone else that's working in this are looking at that and not factoring in for that that shift that happened right there in the middle.
We're using this S word a lot lately.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other S words I can use too.
Well, that is true.
But yeah, that piece frustrates me because when I look at the listing, so I have a client that's buying and selling. They're upsizing, and a couple of them actually that are active in that same boat right now. They look at, when I'm pricing out their house or giving recommendations for it, I'm taking that into account of what's happened.
A true reflection of what's going on in the market or what's going on in that neighborhood or that area. And, again, some areas are still more affluent than others, or some have taken, I think, a harder hit than others.
Yeah, there's been big hits. And if you had a neighborhood, and that's what was happening in this one that's mostly June and before with the comps, it was mostly being driven by investors, cash buyers.
Which have slowed down tremendously.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say slammed on the brakes, but they've definitely pumped the brakes.
Well, especially in some areas more than others, Again, previously I would have thought one of my last listings in Charlotte, a little bit closer to the university area, I thought I was going to have, multiple cash investors. I mean, I got some, obviously, but not near as many as what I would have received had it been 6 months ago.
Yeah. Some have exited the market, some have frozen, some have just been a little bit more wary and more picky. But whatever the case is, when you take that data and you try to apply it to now, it doesn't always match. So I'm seeing incorrect pricing is the biggest issue that we're running into right now.
Well, again, if you log into the MLS right now and we looked at price drops, price improvements.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot out there that have been dropped.
Yeah, in fact, that's funny. Like, I think we can even pull that up live while we're doing this and kind of take a little bit of a peek just to see what, we're talking about over, let's just say the past 7 days, just in our area of how many price improvements we've had.
Well, again, some of that is, you do build it up a little bit for your client, or your client wants to try to see, obviously, as much profit as they can.
Right.
But if you kind of give them this price range of maybe $10,000 or $15,000, and here's what I think it's going to land in, and you go for middle of the row, maybe you go up a few grand, and you have that wiggle room to say, right, if we don't have any activity within a week or 10 days, hey, let's go ahead and drop it back down just a little bit. That's fine. But what I've seen has been major price improvements.
Correct.
I mean, you're talking 20, 30, 100 grand difference on some cases.
And some of them have to be that, because if you look at, if I'm a savvy buyer, which that's the kind of buyers that are
now they're coming out there.
Yeah, if you're dealing with a high interest rate, you got to be savvy on your price and negotiating skills and looking at what's available to you. And if I can get, let's say I'm a first time buyer and I'm looking at maybe 13 to 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and all other things are the same, whether it be school districts, lot size, HOAs, etc. All that's the same, and I can get one place in our area, 300, 350,
pretty average.
But somewhere else is pricing that same type of home at 425 still. You're not going to see any activity.
No.
And so, I mean, looking just in a 3-county area around us, which includes Mecklenburg and Charlotte, we're seeing over the past 7 days 550 price decreases. And that's compared to new listings of only 459. And so that's a huge bar. And we're looking at a graph here. That's a huge change. Increases are only 24, and honestly, when I look at those increases, most
increases,
of the time,
it's a typo.
It's a typo. Somebody put a zero in there when they shouldn't have.
$3 million.
Someone the other day, that and I probably still have it on here, that had 5,224 acres. I'm pretty sure that's a mistake. Yeah, it's been changed. Bless their heart. It was 5,224 acres, which might have been the price per acre.
Price per acre, perhaps,
but not the acreage. Not in a tract development. Yeah. But yeah, when you take a look at just that kind of a change that people are having to make in the prices, number one, you shouldn't have started out that high.
No.
It looks bad on us as the agents, as the realtors,
right?
And also it's just further compounding the confusion for buyers and sellers in the market.
Well, obviously, as a seller, you want to get the highest price that you can, but as an agent, you also have to be extremely realistic and say, yes, I do think this is possible, or as a seller, are you still expecting to sell your house 40 grand above what your agent is telling you because Joe Bob down the street sold that at the start of the year?
Yeah. 6-9 months ago. Right. And the other issue that it compounds, it's a domino effect of, if the seller is expecting 40 grand over list, for their home, then they're pricing that into what they can buy, the next house. And if they can't get that, can they get the next house? Does even moving make sense at that point? They might need to use some of those proceeds to buy down the rate. They might need it for improvements to the home. They might just need it for the down payment.
Down payment, yeah.
Yeah. And so if they now are having to face reality, they're waking up to the reality of of what everyone else is having to do already.
Right. Well, as I say, it's with the last listing, it was okay. Here is where I do think we're definitely going to do. My ranges have kind of moved down a little bit closer, and say, here's where I think we're going to land. I realistically want to do this, but if we don't have any sort of traction, you're still good to drop it down, a few thousand, just that few thousand, sometimes dipping down, it just entices people. But it's not to say, hey, we're greedy, we're going to be cash cows, let's go super high end, when knowing at the end of the day, you're more than likely going to have to drop it.
Yeah.
I would rather just go in where it makes sense.
Right. It was before you could price something a little above maybe what made sense.
Sure, you could dangle that carrot a little bit, so to speak, and just take a try to hope for the best here.
Because even if you did need to knock it down, or you did accept something lower, there are so many people sitting outside the door, figuratively, but almost sometimes literally. That you could risk it. You can't risk it anymore.
You cannot risk it for the biscuit, as they say.
It's got to be smart. And I think the other thing that trips people up is there's so much information that you could go by. Whether it be Joe Bob that you work with telling you, I sold mine for 40 grand over.
Sure.
Or someone on the HOA telling you, this is
just strangers on social media. You put out there, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house, and then you're inundated with, as you say, this information overload of what Joe Bob thinks is what you can get for it, and that's not true.
Yeah, it starts with the ugliest one, which is that Zillow estimate that really has always been a pain in our ass, but now it's not called up to the shift.
Well, as we said before, it's not taking in the accurate information that the MLS and the resources that we use. Yeah. They're not like this. As soon as something is updated on our MLS, we see it.
Yeah.
And you can use that. We've got great statistics. We can do the research and make it into a pretty little presentation for you and say, here's the data that supports why I'm saying price it here.
Yep.
Not just some astronomical price point that Joe Bob down the street sold for 9 months ago.
Yeah, and then you add in the fact of we're eyes on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to meet you in the home, look at what's going on, and factor that in as well. Where Zillow's never been inside your house. I hope not. Maybe Amazon has. I'm convinced that sometimes my Echo Show sees more than I want it to. Flip that little camera thing off. But they can't see inside your house to give you the eyes.
The true picture.
The true
if you
picture,
have
yeah.
the two houses side by side and one has a whole lot better upgrades and amenities inside, is going to be worth a little bit different than the one that's plain Jane, nothing done to it.
Or just been taken care of. If there's maintenance that has to be done on
maintenance
one
that wasn't deferred.
Yeah, if there's maintenance, if one's got a 50-year-old roof and a 30-year-old AC unit, then that's an expense that
Sure.
the buyer's got to take into consideration. It may not affect the appraised value, but it's got to be considered into what's realistic to price it.
Part and parcel of it.
Yeah, it all comes in that recommendation.
Somebody's going to be spending money for something along the way.
Right, and in the previous market, people just swallow it themselves as the buyers.
Well, sure, that's,
investors.
you just wanted to take anything that you could possibly get, and you'd say, right, well, I'll deal with that later.
Yep, it was kicking the can, but we just can't even consider that as an option because no one's going to do it. There's too much other stuff out there. So, in the past 7 days, there's 459 new listings out there. There's a lot of stuff still out there competing against you.
Sure.
If you're listing that house. And if you're on the buy side, then I'm telling all of my buyer clients to not be impatient.
It doesn't pay to be impatient at this stage.
There's too much
the
else out there. There's price decreases that they can take advantage of. There's plenty of stuff still coming up there.
And still some stuff comes back on the market too, it looks like.
Yep. 92 new listings back on the market in the past 7 days in our little 3-county search that we have that we're looking at now. And yeah, that means that there's just a lot for the buyer to be selective about.
Yep.
And if you're the seller, then you've got to account for that, and you've got to be competitive.
Well, you're going to have to step up again, as we had talked about previously. You can't, necessarily talk about the deferred maintenance that you've got to start doing again.
Yep.
You may have to do things like, not necessarily paint, but, just make it nice and make it attractive because you are competing with these other houses now. Whereas before, if we only had a few days worth of inventory, you didn't have to compete.
Nope.
Because, you were going to have that offer. You were going to have something coming your way. Now you have to kind of compete.
Yep. You have to put your best foot forward.
Yep.
And for agents, it's not just about saying to the seller, you got to do all this. We're going to come behind or in front of, actually, and get in front of that and explain what a good comparative analysis looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do, and we call it's called an appraisal when an actual licensed appraiser comes out, but we have a lot of the same tools available to us, and we call it a comparative market analysis, CMA. Sometimes it might be referred to as a broker price opinion, depending on how it's being configured, but the result's the same.
The results are the same, yeah.
And I love doing those. I mean,
they're fun.
I tell people all the time, even if you don't think you're selling, you're just curious about what your house is worth, before you maybe
take that leap
or just go by what Zillow's telling you, let us run a CMA for you. That's actually the reason I got into real estate, is because I like the analytical, investigative side of things, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But that's, to me, the most fun.
You can do the short version of it and do something kind of quick, but as you say, to dive into it and to really give you a good overall picture of everything, we can do that too.
Yep. I mean, I love, it's kind of the nerdy part of real estate is doing the CMAs. But I love doing them. If, people are listening and you're in our market, I'd love to do one for you just for shits and giggles. I don't mind. If you're outside our market, we'll find you a nerd that does like to do it.
Well, it's part of our toolkit. It's what we have to do, regardless if you like it or not. To be a good agent, you have to be good at that thing, right?
You really do.
Because it's a fine art to A, work the numbers, B, be realistic, and then you can figure out where you need to be.
Yeah. And it's
So,
practice for us, regardless of whether or not somebody's going to sell,
Well, and then on the flip side of that too, if I have a buyer that, we're considering maybe a couple different properties, I like to also do the comp report for those to say, hey, here's realistic where I think we can offer, because based on what's been sold previously, the condition of it.
And you have time to do those for the buyers now. Yeah. Whereas before we almost had to stand in the driveway, like you said, do a rough one on the iPad or the phone real quickly to say, are we at least in the right range? Now we can do a thorough one. And then throw
extra money on top of it too.
Yeah. Here's the range. Now how far over are you willing to go? It's not that anymore. It's actually sitting down after the showing in our office, going through all the data, thoroughly analyzing to say, this is where you can expect.
And how long has it been on the market too? Because, no longer is it 3 or 4 days. I've seen a lot that's a week to 2 weeks, and then some other properties I've seen over 100 days, which...
Yeah. It depends on where you're located, obviously. Some
astonishes.
It's all very localized now, where before it was very broad.
Sure.
But, that data is what drives a smart decision. And as we talked about so many episodes before now about the rate being a factor, well, if you're stuck with not being able to do much when it comes to the rate, at least be savvy on the purchase price.
But sure, if you can be savvy on the purchase price, you can't really do anything, as you say, about the rate that it is, but you can down the road maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, it may not be in the next 6 months or a year or even 2 years, but if you can get something for maybe 10 grand, or if the agent completely overpriced it, maybe even less than that, if they're not getting any other offers.
Right.
If you're saving 10, 20 grand, that's a big deal when it comes to a payment at the end of the day.
Yep. And then on the other side too, for the sellers that are listing, you got to have it priced correctly to begin with, so you're not opening yourself up to that long stretched out 150 days on market to where now everyone's going to be lowballing you.
Well, the thing that I would say, I have 2 pet peeves. I've got more pet peeves than that, but
you say so.
But I would say my top 2 pet peeves when it comes to real estate and dealing with other agents. I love you out there, but agents that don't do a good job of price pointing it with, again, I know that there's a range, but if you're not in the ballpark for pricing for your listing, and then crappy pictures where you don't put the toilet seat down. I keep coming back to it, but it drives me bonkers.
Yeah, it's
photos and pricing.
And to your first point, obviously we don't ourselves set the price. We make a recommendation. But I talk to so many people that tell me, well, this agent over here, and we do interview, we're all competing for the listings, told me I can get this. Well, based on what data? Well, based on, I don't know. They didn't really show me data. Well, let me show you data that makes a better informed decision on your side. Did they throw a dart and see
what number they could hit?
Or are they pulling, like we just said earlier, are they pulling from the old, on the back end of the 6 months to which looked a lot better versus now, which here's, not only are these the closed comps, the closed prices, but here's what's active in your market right now. Here's what you're competing against.
Here's what you're seeing. Here's what's currently happening.
I think that's a big factor that people aren't taking into consideration. It doesn't matter if the house down the street closed for $220 a square foot and you want to list for $220. If all the other similar marketed properties that are active right now are $200 a square foot,
guess
then
what?
you need to be $200 a square foot,
right? Because they're going to close before you do.
And people,
generally speaking,
yeah. And if I'm with a buyer and they're telling me, hey, look, let's set up a customized search to show me properties in my price range, and then you come up in that price range, but you're not competitive to the other, let's call it 6 or 7 properties that are also in that same range, in that same radius, then my buyer's going to skip right over it. Because why pay $220 a square foot for the same
I
house?
think of it as going to the grocery store and you have two identical products, maybe a store brand and a name brand, and for all intents purposes, if they taste exactly the same, some things you have to have brand name, right? But if they taste exactly the same, which one are you going to go for if there's a big difference in the price?
Yeah, exactly.
9 out of 10 times you're going to go with that lower price thing. Same thing in real estate. If you have two identical houses, fairly identical houses that meet your criteria and you're happy in either one,
Yeah.
but there's a huge price difference, which one are you going to go for?
Yep. Yep. We have to be realistic, and we have to.
Do we have to be woke?
You got to wake up and smell the coffee. You might have to
Yoda best.
Might be Dunkin' instead of Starbucks or whatever you prefer. But you're right. I mean, there's a choice that buyers are making now when it comes to what they're even setting foot in, and it's,
As you say, they have to be savvy with their money. And if they can't do anything about the rate, then they're going to do their best to get the best deal possible.
Yep.
So you have to be hands-on with what's going on.
yeah. Yeah, it's just there's too much opportunity out there that people are missing. To your second point about photos, I mean, I saw a $750,000 listing that
I do this face all the time, I know, but it makes me cringe.
Yeah, it's our pet peeve. If somebody is coming to me offering me the opportunity to list a $750,000 property, which in our area is at the top end. I mean, I know there's some parts
Unless
on the
you're
West
on
Coast.
the lake, or
Yeah,
all of that stuff.
You know, West Coast folks that might be listening or viewing, like $750,000 doesn't get you into a starter home. I get that, but here in North Carolina, $750,000 that's approaching luxury territory.
It is. Especially in the area that we're at versus, we have some really nice lake areas around us, which of course those homes are going to be a little bit more. But to Regan's point, if you are in this area of outside of Charlotte, that's a huge chunk of change that,
Yeah,
I want those photos to look like $1 million.
Yeah, they shouldn't look like they came off of your camera and you forgot to turn the flash on, which is exactly what I saw. Again, not going to call out any other agents or name the property, but it's out there.
There's situations, right? We talked about off camera too about, you've got photos because there's a tenant in there and you can only do so much. But there's no way when I see a picture of a bathroom when I should see the agent holding the phone.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
No, don't.
Put the toilet seat down.
God, just don't even take the picture if you can't get yourself cropped out of it.
No.
And again, people don't realize just how affordable real estate photography is. We work with a lot of photographers, good friends with them in many cases, and we critique their work.
Sure.
Not just the amateurish cell phone photos. We critique the work of professionals too. And I think we're both very fortunate, and I think this goes for most agents, to have a good contact list of qualified photographers.
Well, and when you don't, if somebody is too busy or you need something, that's where we reach out to each other and say, hey, my normal person can't do it, or I can't do it until next week. Who do you know? Who do you got? And we've saved a lot of photos to look at.
Yeah. Listen, I'll tell the audience, I have a actual bookmark list of embarrassing to the industry listing photos. And I know there's a TikTok and Zillow, what's called, it's a YouTube channel.
I know there's a
Zillow Gone Wild.
Zillow Gone Wild. Yeah.
And we can do that right here. It's not just you have to scour all of Zillow. No, I can look in a 5-mile radius from where we are right now and find, honestly, embarrassing. And I just wish people understood. If your agent tells you that we don't need to do professional photos, or, based on, the negotiated rate, the commission rate, we're not going to do that. That's BS. I'm going to say what it is. There is a very well beaten horse in our little group that says, in our industry, that says that agents are already overpaid. And I'm not going to argue against that, because if if you're telling me you can't afford $150 for photos, you don't deserve to be capturing a $750,000 listing.
Exactly.
I don't care if you don't do aerial photos. Market it how you think is appropriate, but that's the thing. You need to have a discussion with your agent if you're the seller, and agents need to be having discussions with the right
certain people need to wake up and how can you not realize that your listing photos look like
ass? I mean, just rip the Band-Aid off.
You know what I mean?
It's,
you gotta be realistic. That's why I say, again, wake up.
Mm-hmm.
Chrissy, wake up. I don't like this.
We just have to be so realistic, and I get it. If it's a rental property and tenants won't let you in, that's fine. That's not what we're discussing.
But there's also, I understand that's where you have notes and agent has remarks that we only see that we can say, hey, you know what?
This is situational,
whatever.
Situational. It's an investment property. It needs to be ripped down to the studs anyhow. Of course, we're not going to need to hire professional photos to capture the mold stains, but we're going to be truthful, and I'm not asking everybody to get the
but to that point too, and some of that comes down to, again, some of that may affect how you price it as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it's keeping your eyes open, your ears to the ground of what's happening, and making that adjustment to be a good agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We
don't do a disservice to yourself. Don't do a disservice to your clients, because it's not, I don't know.
It's really hard in an industry that's driven by self-employed entrepreneurs, or whatever you call it. We are, everybody that's in real estate is in some way or another probably self-employed. There are some that work for as salary, but for the most part, we're a self-employed industry. We're all working off 1099. We only report to ourselves. Now, you might have a firm that has some policies and rules that you have to abide by, but for the most part, we're all working solo. And the big thing that I run into is some people don't want to take that feedback. And I know it's criticism, but we have to help our industry get better.
Sometimes it's hard to tell sellers no, right? Again,
mm-hmm.
Is it, if somebody says, or you say to your client, hey, I can list your house for $300. And your seller says, no, I want $350. Do you say, okay, well, I can, maybe $310 is pushing my range, and hope that you can negotiate them down? Or is that you know what, if you're not going to listen, or I can't do it, maybe we part ways before we even do it.
Right.
I think some agents just take the deal just to take the deal.
Just to have the sign in the yard with their name on it.
And then don't do anything with it.
Yeah. And, we've all been that newer agent that's starting out. And it's hard to say no to business.
Sure.
And like you said, it's hard to say no to a client when they're telling you, if you don't list it for $350,
I'll just get somebody else.
I'll get someone else.
I'll get somebody else to do it cheaper.
And you can always find somebody to do it cheaper.
Sure.
That'll be the same for this industry or any other.
Mm-hmm.
In most part, there's always somebody who can do it cheaper. But I promise you, in this market, if you list it $50,000 over what it should be, you're not going to get the sale.
No, sure. Some of us, we looked and we talked about it off screen of listings that we didn't get because you told them XYZ number, and guess what? At least 90% of the ones that I've seen have been right in my price range. I know that you've had the same.
Yeah.
So
it comes down to,
whatever.
Just being smart and savvy.
Yep.
And being honest with the client. And
be honest with yourself as an agent too. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, the bar, they don't have a super high bar as real estate agents. I hate to say it, but
it's a pretty
if you
low
can get your license,
price of entry.
If you can do this, rock stars were up here.
Yeah, but we're not asking people to do much more than walk and chew gum at the same time when we say price it based on what the market is saying now.
Right.
Not what the market said 6 months ago. Not what the market even said 3 months ago. And then be honest with yourself and with the clients.
Sure, because buyers are, as you say now,
it's incredible. I keep bookmarks of a lot of things, and I keep bookmarks of properties that I have walked into and felt like this is going to be a challenging property market. And sometimes I feel bad for the listing agent because it's completely outside their control.
Sure.
I had one very recently up in a rural area. Rural. Hello, Newton. That unfortunately, the home itself was immaculate. It was priced based on recent comps and recent other stuff around it. Very clean, very easy to show. Good curb appeal for the house. But if you turned and looked to the left of this house was a sad situation of another home just a few feet away that,
your neighbor sells your home, by the way, if you didn't already know that.
Yeah, and the reaction that I got from my clients was exactly what I expected. If we could pick this house up and move it, this would be the perfect house. But unfortunately, the neighbor killed the deal. And the listing agent, unless they got some cash in their pocket and they can pay to clean up that situation, or the seller can, they're not going to find anything that they can really do in that situation. So I get it. Like, there's some things that are outside of our control, extraneous to us factors that just unfortunately are what they are. But we try to be creative.
Yes, we do. Sometimes you have to be extra creative.
I have walked over to a neighbor's yard and just politely asked them to change a couple things for us. And here's a token of my appreciation in the form of a Target gift card.
Do what you gotta do.
Yeah. So we do what we gotta do.
We do what we gotta do.
And it's it's all good discussion about just what it takes.
I think the theme of today is just everybody sort of waking up to the reality of the way that it is. The market changes and you've got to kind of change with it.
Yeah.
Whether you are that buyer, the seller, or a real estate agent, you have to be aware of what's happening.
Yep, absolutely.
Point in case, I mean.
Yeah, there's a lot, we could go on with other examples, I'm sure, and for another time. But yeah, I think we're kind of reaching the end of our time for today. Good discussion. If you have other things that are just on your mind, you're listening, you're watching, please shoot us a DM, please shoot us an email. Our information will be in the show notes here, down below or at the end card. So reach out to us. We'd love to have your comments, your feedback, and your questions.
If you're watching on YouTube, as always, we ask that you like and subscribe.
Please do. It
Share
makes a big
with your
difference.
friends. It does make a difference for us to reach out to the audience a little bit more and share, hopefully, our stories, our tips and tricks with everybody out there. So
absolutely. And again, I'm Regan Hildebrand. You can find me on social media at Regan.
And I am Bridget Quinn, and you can find me on all social media at B. Quinn Realtor.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
See ya.